Welcome to the Train Like a King podcast, dedicated to all things paddling, designed to help paddlers of all levels get motivated to get out on the water. Tune in, grab your paddle, and let's train like a king. Welcome back to another Train Like a King podcast episode. I think I'm going to name this episode the Tahiti Domino Effect. In the previous episode, I talked about winning my first Premier Men New Zealand 250 meter title. And after that win, and I'm pretty sure because of that win, I was invited to compete in a race in Tahiti called the Tahiti Nui. I was invited by Kingy Gilbert, who put together a team of Kiwis. I think there was 12 to 13 of us in total, of young and old, experienced, some of the best paddlers that we had here in New Zealand that were available. And we went over to compete in this race, Tahiti Nui. And it was an amazing race. 3-day race around the island of Tahiti. 3 legs, covering, I want to say 160 kilometers over the 3 days. So it was by far the biggest and most prestigious race I had ever done up until that point. And yeah, it was awesome. Although I would say we did get handed to by the Tahitians. We arrived, I don't know, I want to say in the middle of the pack, but maybe towards the back of the numbers. But the experience and the learning that we gained from that was great. I want to say what was better was just the motivation derived from seeing the level of the Tahitians for the first time and seeing how passionate they are about the sport of va'a and just how big the sport is there. For those that don't know, va'a or paddling there is like their rugby for us. Rugby to us is va'a to them. And yeah, it was just so awesome to line up against all these top Tahitian teams, so many paddlers, and experience it. One story about that trip in particular, and I always hold this memory quite close, was we were testing out canoes to use for the race. And we got to, thanks to EDT VAR, we got to test out a few different canoes. One was full carbon. One was, there was this one particular canoe, though, that was all white, and it was named Sonic. And just as we were taking it out to test it, a guy on a surf ski stops by and he says, "Hey, are you using this canoe for the race?" Questions us. And to be honest, I didn't actually know who it was at the time, but it was actually Lewis Loughlin. And for those of you that don't know who Lewis Loughlin is, he is a 10 plus time champion of the Te Aito. He's a 10 plus time champion of the Super Aito. He's a legend in the V6 six-man races too, but also a legend in the surf ski world. And he actually built the canoe. I think he designed it, and it was his canoe. And he said to us, if you do decide to use this canoe, then I will follow you around the race. And man, that was awesome. It was like we had this paddling royalty, basically as a coach, as a boat coach. He was on the support boat every day with a microphone, telling us what to do, how to do changeovers properly. All of this info that was so valuable. I look back now, it's just amazing that he did that for us. Even would bring us lunch, and one of the best memories I have of him talking to us. We were sitting around the table after they won, I think, and we were all pretty beat up. And he just would describe the type of training that he would do, waking up early hours of the morning, um, and get out there and do, hours on the water before anyone even woke up. By the time when people were putting their canoes to go out to train, he was already finished. He'd go home, eat, sleep, and then do the same thing again in the afternoon. And I want to say that he was one of the first to do that, to forge that path. I, w- I mean, there were probably other sports that you could gauge that off, ultra, marathon running, training type way. But I think he was the first to do that in the sport of VAR. And he said, he a lot of the paddlers there, including himself, did that with not a lot of money. Like he said, he lived on breadsticks or the French baguette with I think it was corned beef, or baked beans or something like that, just for lunch, all the basics. But yeah, that was just a little story about Lewis Loughlin helping us out, and it's really cool to see that he's actually starting his own coaching at the moment again, in Tahiti. So big ups to that. He spent a bit of time in New Zealand too, training when he was doing some kayak training, I believe in Gisborne, and so there's a lot of cool connections that we can make between Tahiti and New Zealand, um, and Hawaii, obviously. We look at Tahiti as like the obviously performance. Their performance just is super high overall, but a lot of the development can be traced back to, say, New Zealand, Hawaii. We're all connected. But yeah. So anyway, back to the topic of the domino effect. So basically, that trip was amazing. It was tough. Had blisters on blisters after the 3 days of racing. But I came back to New Zealand with a whole new mindset. It opened my eyes to the level of the Tahitians. And I remember going back to uni and going back to school. And my father called me and to see how the trip went. And he asked me basically, do I want to go back and do another race called the Te Aito, a V1 race, individual race that, like I said in a previous episode, my sister had already competed in this race, and my father went with her in 2009. So this is 2013, and my dad knows of the Te Aito, so he asked me, "Hey, do you want to go?" And it was only a few like months or weeks after the Tahiti Nui, and I said, "Sure, I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go." And that led me to competing in my first Te Aito race in Tahiti. That was 2013, and I remember placing. I went back and I placed 127th in the Te Aito. Big ups to Jean Tetohu for kind of starting that era too. He would bring us paddlers in, and that's where I first met my Tahitian family, the Duce family, Teiva, Suzanne, Manuiva, Mehotea, and all my family, who have become my second family over the years. They hosted us from early on and still to this day. So it was cool to have them recently in New Zealand. But nothing compares to what they've done for me and for a lot of other paddlers here from New Zealand, especially during those Te Aito events. So 2013 was the first time, and I placed 127th, and it just became an obsession of mine to keep coming back, and I wanted to just get better and better. So I think the next year, 2014, I might have got down to maybe in the 60s, and then 2006, I think in the 60s for the Te Aito, but then 30 something for the Super Aito. And then in 2015, so my third year going to Tahiti to compete in the Te Aito and the Super Aito, that was the first year I did really well. So the Te Aito, I placed 35, but then the Super Aito, I placed 10th. So I placed in the top 10. First time placing in the top 10. 2016 was a stagnant year. Came back, and I think the best I did was 11th. So I just got kicked out of the top 10. And then 2017, I think the best I did in the Super was sixth place. So that was the best year to date. And then 2018, 2019, I think were top 15 performances. And then obviously COVID hit. So also during that time, I was very fortunate because in 2015, when I did place in the top 10, the Super Aito, that afternoon, a very renowned coach of a really prestigious team in Tahiti came and knocked on the door where I was staying with the Douces, and that was Wilfred Armin. And that night he asked me, do you think you can, he chucked me a booklet of raffle tickets. And he says, do you think you can sell these? And do you want to paddle with Paddling Connection in the upcoming race in the Catalina Crossing in about a month's time? So it was a month away, and I was like, sure. One kind of domino after another domino, things were just kind of falling in my lap, basically. And I said, yeah, came back to New Zealand, sold all my tickets, and a few weeks later, I was on the plane to go and race for the first time with the Paddling Connection in the Catalina Crossing. And then that led me to more racing, because not only was I doing the Te Aito and the Super Aito, but I was also competing in the Catalina, the Hawaii Nui, and all these races leading up to it. So I was spending a lot of time in Tahiti. And yeah, like I said, it was just a domino effect. And the influence of competing and training and spending a lot of time in Tahiti, that only helped to benefit my New Zealand racing and performance with my club team, Ngahoi Horo Herberts on tour, but also in my singles. So I credit a lot of my success in the singles to my experiences in Tahiti. So big thank you to Wilfred Armin for bringing me on board, and all my Paddling Connection friends. And I will touch on it here. So 2013 was my first premiership win. And then subsequently from then, I think that's when I, started to do really well at the New Zealand Nationals consistently, and basically ended up with, 12 Premier Men sprint titles between 2013 and now. So that's for both 500 meter and 250 meter. So kind of 6 years, not necessarily consecutive, but 6 years of wins in the Premier Men division. So, like I said, I am very grateful for my experience. Like without the racing and training in Tahiti, it wouldn't have been as easy to get those. So, yeah. That's basically the domino effect. During that time, one of the things that really helped me was Air Tahiti Nui ambassadorship. So I became an ambassador for an airline, and so at one point I was getting free return tickets to Tahiti. So I was flying there, sometimes 6 times a year, to do all sorts of races, and sometimes I was staying, month, 2 months. But like I said, it was good because it was during the time that I was doing my bachelor's degree and then my master's degree. So it was good timing for me because I was studying and subsequently traveling the world, and just it was it was a, an amazing experience. 99% of my trips have been paddling associated, and therefore, without pedaling, I never would have been able to experience the experiences that I have and that I continue to experience now. So I'm I'm forever grateful. I think I'd like to say that I've traveled more than I would have if I was a competitive kayak sprinter. You know, who travels every 4 years to an Olympics. Obviously, they go to world champs and stuff, but the amount of racing that you can do on a world circuit in the world of outrigger is, yeah, it can keep you going year round. And yeah, so although I did start paddling from a young age, 7 years old, 2013 was the beginning of the serious training and racing all year round. Um, like, because not only was our nationals in January, but the Aito was in July, and then the Hawaii Nui was in November. So, like, by the time you finish a race, you're preparing for the next. And so, yeah, that's basically it for this episode. Um, Thank you for listening. I think the next episode, I'm going to dive into my master's degree research. I think that'll be a good topic, because that was going on in the background whilst I was out paddling and doing all these amazing races. So stay tuned for that. Kia ora. Thank you for listening to the Train Like a King podcast. Check out trainlikeaking.com for training plans, coaching opportunities, or even merchandise. Catch you on the next episode.